My name is Anette Aga, like you said. I am currently taking a master's in visual communication. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of comics in the apparent and the apparent lack of focus on them in Norwegian academia. The overwhelming majority of known Norwegian comic book artists have no formal training in their profession. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. Why is that? Comic books are a very important part of youth culture in Norway. You can see the influences in newspapers, characters, and a general Norwegian illustration tradition. And why do we not take comic books seriously? And would we take it more seriously by offering an education with it in mind? Maybe. I would like to open this talk by talking a little bit about my childhood. I always knew that I wanted to be a comic book artist. And during my childhood, I made a lot of comics, and I made them to express my thoughts and sharing ideas. And I found that it was very simple, but a very, very effective way of communicating with people. I participated in a local comic book workshop, and the most important one was a weekly one, which was called Tegneloftet, which is still running today. And here, we as teenagers got advice from more experienced artists, and it was a great time. I learned a lot during those years, and I was a very, very eager student. And at age 19, I even was a teacher there for a brief time. But I realized that I was not really qualified for this job, that I had gaps in my knowledge. And I kind of wanted to fix that. So I went to art school, because that was where you went when you wanted to learn creative stuff, or so I heard. But this was not what I expected. Being an aspiring comic book artist, I needed to work small and condensed, as you may know. But art school, they really wanted me to make really, really big stuff. And the feedback was often a problem, because I understand that certain pedagogical philosophies value giving students all their freedom, but when you work with comics, that kind of creates a problem, because you really, really need to work with the framework of comics. So maybe it was the school, maybe it was the programs, the teachers, the increasing descent into despair, which often happens in art school. But I did not feel that I was being taken seriously. And every time I steered my projects towards comics, I felt that I was pulled over by the art police and fined for indecency. Yeah, 2 years of plastic up construction, and I quit art school, and I went for university level design school. And with a focus on illustration, because that was the closest thing I found that kind of resembled the comic book dream that I had. In design class, we're crammed together, as one would expect with a bachelor program. Illustration, interaction design, graphic design, everything in one class. And during my bachelor, I only had 2 courses that were directly aimed at illustration and no typography. I don't know why, but that was the case. I was not the only one who was a little bit unsatisfied. There were 2 other extremely talented classmates I had that dropped out during our second year. They had complained about some of the same things that I was complaining about. They both made comics. The teachers at my school had very varied opinions about the comic book as a media. Some simply didn't care. Some were openly not interested. And it was clearly not an obvious part of the curriculum. So after the bachelor, I was lost again. Still gaps in my knowledge, and I felt lost as a comic book artist and as an illustrator. And I realized that the best education I have had with comic books in mind was actually the workshops that I had as a teenager. And I thought that since academia didn't consider a formal education in comics important, then it wasn't important. So I had a talk with Kim Holm, who is a local comic book artist and teacher here in Bergen. And he argued that comics are above illustration in terms of complexity. It's a basic mode of communication that we humans have used since the first cave paintings. And it deserves the respect of its historical roots. And I kind of agree with this, because there are certain things you need to know when you're making comics. which you don't really know, which you don't necessarily need to know when you are making illustrations. While comics deal with basic storytelling, illustrations more often deals with style and composition. A very famous American comic book writer called Lucy Nicely has once said that comic books are the perfect love child between picture and too fast. Picture and picture and image. And since humans hold both stories and art in such high regard, it seems weird that we are not capable of holding the combination of those as high. Anyways, back to my original. It's going really fast. Whew, okay. My original point, the overwhelming majorities of the known Norwegian comic book artists have no formal training in their profession. And it's not really hard to see why, because even among them, there is this belief that this is not a real profession. And they're afraid that the reality police will come knocking on their door and drag them off to a 9-to-5 job. And academia is not really doing anything to improve this. So, but there is change. There is a lot of folkeskola which offer one-year courses now in comic books, and NKF in Bergen has an illustration program which offers comic book focus. But the universities are still not really helping. While this talk was mostly consisted of me shaking a stick at the art school, I must admit that I've learned stuff. I'm very, very grateful for my education. But I haven't learned that much about comic books, which I consider a bit unfair.